I really like the very cool pig.
The very cool pig, look at that. That is a cool pig, isn't it? If I was a dead pig, I'd want my meat to look like that. Hey Lowwinners, it's Lardy6 here, another video. And how many times have you asked the question, do I want Chinese food tonight? Sometimes we're too lazy to cook, sometimes we're too lazy to go out for a big fancy meal, sometimes we want something cheap. So in the West, or at least in America, a lot of people say, let's get Chinese tonight. Now Chinese takeout is usually, it's kind of a fast food in a way. It's quick, it's dirty, it's cheap, and everyone has their local favorite Chinese restaurant. Now if you check out my video on my channel where Vivi, my wife, she's actually a Chinese woman trying American Chinese food for the first time, it's quite the laugh. But I'm actually gonna pose another question to you. It's one of those questions that you kind of ask but are never answered, right? For example, like in America, we say, if you dig far enough down in the dirt, you'll end up in China. Now, what do they say in China? If they dig all the way down, do they end up in America? Well, the question I'm asking today is, do Chinese people go out for American food? For example, we say, I'm gonna go out for Chinese tonight. Do they say the same thing? The short answer to that is absolutely, but it's not so simple because American food isn't really a thing here. It's called Western food or Xichan. Now, Western food in China is this kind of insane conglomeration of all countries' food together. So you got Japanese, Indian, Thai, Italian, French, American, all of these countries' food together and cuisines end up kind of lumped together in Western food. And that doesn't make any sense considering Japan or Thailand or India, for example, is not in the West, right? But despite all these foods being lumped together into Western food, Chinese people absolutely do go out to eat it. Now, it does have different scales, and it is kind of ridiculous to think about all these countries together being lumped into one group, but we do the same thing with Chinese food because, as we know, China's provinces all have their own cuisine, and when we say Chinese food, we're actually just talking about chow mein or egg rolls or General Tso's chicken, things like this. Now, Chinese people do the same thing with cuisines here from different countries around the world. And to be honest, there are different levels here of Western food or foreign food in China. For example, we can go all the way down to fake rip-off KFC restaurants. Actually, Winston and I went to something called Paleo Burger or something, Pala Burger, and it was kind of this weird bastardization of Burger King mixed together with KFC. So you can go all the way down to these kind of counterfeit foreign restaurants. You can go to KFC. Pizza Hut is a completely different world here in China. It's actually kind of like a upper middle class restaurant where people go. The menu's about this thick. You could drink wine there. They have like wine pairings of different pasta dishes and stuff. It's absolutely crazy. Of course, you have things like McDonald's and KFC, like I mentioned. But then you can go up, and actually we're here right now in a very, very foreign populated area of China, and this is actually called Shikou. And it's a place in Shenzhen where Winston actually lives. It's a first-tier city, and a lot of foreigners live here for the oil business and a lot of foreign businesses that have sprung up around this area because of its close proximity to Hong Kong. Now, these restaurants that are here, this foreign or Western food, are not just for the foreigners that live here. Actually, a lot of Chinese people will come from within the city to this little place to eat foreign food. Now, it's not so simple because they're not necessarily going there because they really, really have a hankering for some Indian food or they really, really want a good Australian steak. What they're actually doing is coming here to do something called zhuangbi, and that kind of term means to kind of pose, right? Now, if you are a Chinese person that has any sort of money, in China, you absolutely know how important face is. So you get a nice car that looks flashy. Maybe it's out of your price range, but it's really, really important to have the nicest car and the nicest things in your house. It's a very materialistic society, and the same goes for going out to eat. Because of guanxi, connections, and face, and its importance in Chinese culture, a lot of people in China will go to expensive Western restaurants, not for the food, but to show off to their friends, or to impress business clients, or to impress a new woman that you want her to think you're really rich, things like this. Now, there's a lot of reasons that people do that, but the food is kind of a second-tier importance compared to the face that you get when eating Western food. So connections and face and all that kind of stuff aside, what do Chinese people actually like to eat in terms of American or Western food, as they call it? Well, one thing I noticed is that if you're gonna look at fast food, you go to McDonald's or KFC, of course KFC is famous for their chicken, but if you go to McDonald's, almost all of the menu items are also chicken related. They do have Big Macs and hamburgers and all that kind of stuff, but when Chinese people say hanbao or hamburger, actually what they're talking about is a chicken burger, which I found quite interesting. Now, in terms of wanting to go take your family out for a nice evening, a lot of times 5-star hotels will actually have a Western buffet. And that usually involves some people wearing ridiculous chef's hats and roast beef cutting station. But what I've noticed a lot of times is that in these Western buffets that's supposed to have Western food, whatever that might mean, it's actually full of Chinese food as well. So oftentimes you can see that people are actually there for the experience, to look like they're eating fancy, expensive Western food because of the kind of positive image that's attached to it. So when they're there, maybe they don't particularly like the food that's on offer, so they'll actually prefer to eat the Chinese food that's on offer as well. At least with my wife and Chinese friends, when I've taken them to eat Indian food, I've noticed that it's wildly unpopular. Number one, they don't like to eat things with their hands. There's not a whole lot of bread and things, like stuffing things with inside of bread and pitas and all that kind of stuff in Chinese cuisine, so that's a little bit strange. And the curries are much too strong tasting. A lot of the times, especially down south where we live, people prefer really, really bland food. They call it qingdan, and they're kind of proud of that, how bland their food can be. So Indian food kind of goes against that. It's a little too spicy, a little bit too strong. Another thing that's super popular, or at least, I don't know, to show off how much money you have, is steak. There's actually a restaurant here called Wang Steak, and it actually is Wang Steak, I apologize. Wang means king. Anyway, there's a franchise of restaurants here that actually sell steaks. And it's actually supposed to be French cuisine despite it being a Chinese-owned company. And you'll at least spend $100 per head if you go to these restaurants. And they're full of this really, really gaudy furniture and kind of like ornate paintings and stuff that looks like it comes from my grandma's basement. And people who are willing to spend a lot of money to be able to go there and say, I ate steak last night with my wife or my girlfriend or my business partner. It's a real big thing for them. So steaks are definitely really, really popular as well. Now, Japanese food sometimes lumped under the same kind of image as Western food. Like I said, at some of these five-star hotels, they'll have a sushi bar next to a place where you get steak. It doesn't make any sense because it's called a Western buffet. But oftentimes, Chinese people actually really like Japanese food because it's pretty mild tasting, and it has a lot more similarities with Chinese food than Western food has. Thai food isn't super, super popular amongst Chinese people, I've noticed. I think that has something to do with the spice or the kind of strong flavors involved in Thai cooking as well. Really big thing is actually Korean food. Korean food is wildly popular right now, and I don't know if that's attached to the popularity of K-pop or Korean dramas or things like that, but that's absolutely popular here in China. Actually, Winston did a video where he had his Chinese wife Sasha try Korean food in China, and actually in almost every shopping mall, it seems like you can find a Korean barbecue or a chicken and beer restaurant, as they call it. It's crazy popular here. And more you're seeing Western chains pop up, like I said, you have Burger King, KFC, McDonald's, pizza, all these things, but they always have a Chinese twist to them. For example, in almost every city in China now, you can find a Starbucks. I live in a pretty small third-tier city, but we have a lot of Starbucks franchises open up. Now, when I actually asked my cousin who works there, a Chinese girl, what do Chinese people like to order from Starbucks? More often than not, it's not actually coffee. It's usually the cakes or sandwiches on offer, or they have lots of fruity different teas and kind of milky beverages that are super, super sweet. And actually, there's kind of spin-offs of Starbucks in my city now that are getting more and more popular that actually take a cup of very, very milky weak coffee and then add cheese, like whipped cheese on top of it. It's absolutely crazy stuff. So that, like I said, there's always kind of a Chinese spin on some of these Western offered items. Well, to sum it up, do Chinese people go out for American food? Yes, if you call it Western food. It's absolutely a thing here in China, but like I said, it's more about showing off rather than enjoying a culinary adventure like most Westerners kind of delude themselves into thinking that they're doing when they go out on some main strip and try different foods from around the world. Western food is more expensive, usually, often imitated here with knockoff restaurants, and I gotta be honest with you, unless the restaurant is foreign owned, I've noticed that Western food typically doesn't taste very good here in China. Anyway, that's all, Lao Winners. Thank you so much, and I will catch you on the next one.
Chinese convenience stores. How are they different from the convenience stores in your country? You have to be careful because I have seen 812s and the like here in China. They do tend to like to copy the logo, but that does appear to be a real one.
Hello, 不能拍啊，先生。
为什么？
我们公司规定不能在这里拍摄。
I mean, we've got like these pretty cool, strong alcohol, vodka kind of mixer things, and you have a huge selection and they're very cheap. Very, very cheap. For smokers, I'm sure you'll love it. And of course, yes, we do actually have condoms over here, which is useful, but Yeah, I know I've had a lot of my foreign friends, myself included, complain a little bit about the sizes that are available here.